Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this program on the war in Yemen. And it's kind of a curious topic, the war in Yemen, because, or at least in the Netherlands, we know quite little about it. What's going on in Yemen? Well, we do know that there is a civil war, a devastating civil war going on for at least 4 years now. And just to give you kind of an idea of what the impact is, there are 28 million people living in Yemen, and over more than 22 are in direct need of humanitarian assistance. And yet we see so few about this on our media. I mean, the NOS sometimes reports about it, and you might read something about it on Fox or on social media. But still, it's hard to grasp what's really going on, and that's what we're going to talk about this evening. So, what's really happening in Yemen? We'll try to explore the conflict, the strategic interest involved, what are the various parties, factions fighting, what's the role of the United States, the UN, and is there a way out of this conflict? Who should we turn to? And we'll have, so we'll organize the evening as follows. We have 2 brief lectures. The first one is by Moosa Elayah. He's a political scientist from Yemen. He's been working at the political science department at Sana University, I just heard during dinner. But he's also been working at Radboud University at the anthropology group and the Center for International Development Issues. He's going to talk about the background of the conflict. So what warring factions are there, the failure of the various peace processes, and the extent of the food crisis and the role of NGOs in managing this, or maybe not so successfully yet, managing the conflict, the role NGOs play in this. After his lecture, we'll listen to Jutta Joachim. She's a political scientist working at Radboud University. She's an associate professor in international relations, and she will also, from that lens, provide a perspective on the civil war in Yemen. So you can imagine she talks about what the role of Saudi Arabia, for instance, is in the conflict, or Iran. And of course, the US is also in some way involved. So what are they doing there? And what's the role of the UN? Are they acting in a responsible fashion? And what can we expect of them? After their 2 lectures, we'll briefly dive into the conflict a bit more, trying to flesh out what's really going on. So we'll talk about the origins of the war. We'll talk about the responsibilities of the international community for this conflict. And we'll try to see whether there are pathways out of this conflict. My name is Jutta Tempels. I'm program manager at Radboud Reflects. I'll be your host this evening. But that being said, I think it's fair to start, and I would like to give the floor to Moosa Elayah. Thank you.
First of all, I would like to thank Radboud Reflect for making this evening possible, and also especially to Taida and Elizabeth for their efforts to organize this event. Thank you all for coming today. And I'm going today to reflect some ground reflections about the war in Yemen. And before, I think it's very important to give you some basic information about the country itself. Yemen is located in the southern part of the European Peninsula, and its size is a big country. Its size almost 13 times like the size of Netherlands, 656,000 kilometers square. The population growth in the country is really so huge, and the population is almost 28 million persons now in Yemen, estimated, and the society divided into 2 religion groups. The Sunni, they are between 60 to 70%, and the Zaydi Shiites between 30 to 40%. The climate in Yemen the country is really dry and hot. There is some very nice places like, For example, Damar is like mostly like Netherlands, and also Eb Governorate is green, and some governorates also they are green, but mostly it's dry and also desert, but it's rich of oil, a lot of oil in Yemen. But before, and you see that before before the war, the oil was the main income for the national income in Yemen, or the traditional economy in the country. The country for so long time is facing two main problems. It's the arms circulation, that in Yemen almost 60 million guns for almost 27.5 million person, and also the water problem, the water crisis, and Netherlands is spending a lot of money there, and also so many programs trying to solve the problem, especially in two cities that are Sana'a, the capital, and also Taiz. This just basic information about the country, and later on we can also discuss about it. If you see that about the social groups, they are very important to speak about it. They can give you also clue about also the different factions who are fighting now in the country. In Yemen, we have the four groups: the Sada, the Gadis, and Sheikhs, and the owners. The Sada, they are claiming that they are inherited from the Prophet Muhammad, and they have mandate from God to rule the country. And the Houthis, they are from this group, and they are 2% of the society, and they have very strong political and administrative roles, and even before the war, for almost 1,000 years. The same thing for the other groups like the Qadis and the Sheikhs and the owners. The tribes, they are well educated, you see. They are well educated in the society. And you see that the other groups, especially, and who have strong also positions, it was the governmental staff and the army, but they have clientelism policy between these four groups and these two groups, and they ran the country for a long time. Also, we have a special group. They told them the servants. They are also doing some jobs like the haircut or selling meat, and they are serving the whole groups in the society. They are protected by the other groups. Here you see the women. They are 52 of the whole society, and they have weak position, political position, and administrative roles, and they are not that well educated. Just only 27% of them. And there is a saying in Yemen. They told the worst place to be a woman is in Yemen, but also I have saying that is also the worst place for any country, especially a poor country, to be also a neighbor of a rich country. It's like Yemen also. Is what also Mexico in United States also the same thing. Is a lot of examples about this case. So I'm moving now to who are really fights whom and where in Yemen. I think everybody of us knows that we have two forces of war in Yemen, factions. We have the Hadi forces backed by the Saudi Arab coalition, and we have the Houthi forces backed by Iran and other Shia forces in the country. I think also there is also the Southern movement, and also the Al-Qaeda and ISIS as a different actors, or also different forces. But the case is not like this. It's very more complicated. And there are different factions, sub-factions. They have their own structures. And you can see that this one, it can be one structure, and this one, it can be one structure, but there are also sub-factions, and they have also their own structures. It is really difficult for me to understand how they are, even sometimes the forces within Hadi group, they fight to each other. And also they are fighting with the Houthi forces. So if you see that we have four factions of the Hadi, some of them, they are the formal units of the national army before, when the Saleh was ruling the country, and also the forces of the Islah parties are some militias for the Muslim Brotherhood branch in Yemen. They are located here in this place in Taiz mainly, and also in Marib in this place in the east of Yemen. And also there are some militias of the tribe under the leadership of Ali Mohsen Al-Ahmar. This person was the ex-second man of of Saleh, because he was really the person who held a lot of power before, and he has some militias. We have also the Republican Guards. This under the leadership of the nephew of the former president. This is established by Emirates. They regathered the former National Guards. They were really protecting the Saleh, and they are well trained by the United States and also some European countries. They trained them as special units to fight against terrorism in the country, and they regathering them, and they are located in this place from Mukha Bor to the Hodeidah, and in some places here and in this location, the Republican Guards. And we have also the Amalika forces. This is including also some Salafi fighters. They have the Wahhabi faith, so they are against the Houthis based on religion, religious side, based on faith, and they are pro-Hadi, and they are strong, very strong fighters. Also within Hadi forces, they have also some spatial structure of factions. They have their loyalties to the Emirat or to Saudi. For example, the new Southern movement in Aden, in this place, they are really backed by the Emiratis, and the President Hadi has no authority over them. And also they have the Hadramaut National Army, the same thing, established by the Emiratis in Hadramaut, in this place, in the Mukalla, in this place, and they also some Yemeni businessmen who are really placed now in the GCC countries, in the Gulf countries. Also, there are some other Salafi military backed by United Arab Emirates. They are located also here in Taiz. And this group also had a fight with the Islah party, and because they have a different perspective, and also they have different interests. Within the Houthi also, they have also 6 groups, and we have the Houthi religious militias, and they are from the 2% I just mentioned. They were before like 10,000 person in 2000. They went to Lebanon and to Iran. They trained there, and they told them the Al-Shabab al-Mu'min before. Now they are almost like 30 to 40,000 person, and they are well trained, and they have also all the administrative and the political roles now in the country, and also the leadership roles within the different forces within the Houthi group. And we have also some militias from the tribes. They are especially from the Zaydi areas, and also some units from the formal national and police army. There's also they are also fighting with the Houthi against the Hadi forces. Also, the Houthi was also is trying to approach the gangs in the different neighborhoods in Yemen, in Sana'a or in Taiz. The people, they have no job, they are jobless, and he also approached them, giving money and trained them, and they sent them to the fronts to fight. The same thing for the refugees from Africa, especially from Somalis and also from Ethiopia. They are also fighting with the Houthis. Also, there are some Lebanese and Iranis, also experts and fighters. They are also transferring the military know-how and also building the capacity, the military capacity and capability of the Houthis. This actually the different factions and all of them. You can see that maybe in some time this one can fight with this. The group number 2 can fight with the group 1. And the 3. So there is no unity even within the different factions. They can fight easily. if we can have a peace talk between the Hadi forces, the Hadi and Houthi, maybe in the future these also forces can also fight to each other. And it's very complicated, and we will speak about it later about this case. Also, we have the Southern movement. We have also the retired military and security workers, and they were the core of establishing the Southern movement, and they as a faction. And we have also other faction. Is they over it is loyalty to the ex-president Ali Salim al-Bid. He was the president of the South, and after 1990 he became the ex-vice president of Saleh. And there is also a faction, its loyalty to Ali Nasser Muhammad. He was also ex-president of the South before the 1986. It happened in Yemen civil war, and he escaped to Syria and also different places afterward. And he still has a faction within the Southern movement. And we have also a faction for the President Hadi. Also within the Southern movement, there is also a faction for the Qaeda within. And there is a special leader of Al-Qaeda is within the Southern movement, militias. There is also the youth and the civil society organization who are really active here in Europe and at different places to promote the separation of the Yemen, the north and the south. And they have no power. They just only write in the media, or they are trying to just promote for this project, but they don't have the actual military power in the ground. And also we have the two groups, the terrorist groups that the Qaeda and ISIS, some group have, they have their loyalties to the ISIS. If you see these different groups, if you have, for example, a proposal that we need to have two countries, you see all these groups will fight to each other. It is still the same problem will continue. No one group will stay, and we told, okay. So in my proposal, I have done research about it. I told, in Yemen, we need peace enforcement. Peace building will not work in Yemen. We need to build up the military capability and capacity to empower one group in order to impose the peace to the other group. Otherwise, we will not achieve the peace if we spend a long time and also a lot of money and efforts in this regard. Also, there is one important issue I need to mention to it before I move to the other part of my lecture, my presentation. This is about the children who are really in fighters in the different factions. We have almost now 42,000 child. They are fighters in the different groups. Within the Houthi is around 72 Houthi forces and 15 within the Hadi forces, and Al-Qaeda is around 90%. You see the future, how the future of the country. The kids now, they are fighting now in a different groups, and especially they use them even for a sexual use. They are also transferring military equipment and supplies, managing also checkpoints, and also planting explosive devices. This is really the gloomy situation and a gloomy picture about the war in Yemen. And you see here the effect of the war in the society, that now every 5 minutes, one child under 5 dies also. They are killing the childhood in our country, in Yemen. And it was before 10 minutes, but now it is 5 minutes. Now we are talking like 2 kids, they died already, passed away. Almost 20 million, some people, they told 22, they are really in need of foreign aid and assistance. And almost 10 million person, they are really suffering from the starvation and famine. Some of them, they die of hunger. Already 95,000 child died by use of different causes that can be overcome, from health things to also the war itself. The education itself, that the school, almost like 3,400 schools was damaged. And this is all these schools, they were built by foreign aid from Holland, from Germany, from other countries. So now we need to rebuild them again. This is also one of the things. The kids, like 3.4 million child, will have no chance to get education. And the refugees in the country, they are 3.5 million. Because Yemen is really closed, they don't have chance to come to here. This is why Yemen is a forgotten country and forgotten war. The people, they just start to think about the country when they see the refugees like the Syrians in front of their doors. But because Yemen is closed, we have just only internal displaced people. We have like 350,000 refugees outside, but they are especially in Egypt or in Jordan and in these countries. In Holland, we have like, I think, like 500 or 700 person as refugees. They came as to study here and they stayed or like that. Until the June 2019, the estimated reconstruction cost in the country is around $55 billion. Before the war, we were looking just only for 10 billion to build our country and to really to have a good life there. I think it can also contribute to stop any problems to happen. But now we have like 55, we are looking for a 55 billion so far, and I think it will be more, and especially in the scenario of the United Nations, that maybe the war in Yemen will stop in 2030. It could be, can reach like $300 billion, the reconstruction cost for the country. Here, if you see, this is I just spoke about the size of the problem, the crisis. Now the international community is trying to help the country. And there are a lot of taxpayers in the different countries. They are trying to help. They have a good attention when they see the pictures, the videos of the people who are suffering. They're trying to donate and also to give money. But if you see that I just did a research about it, and the total amount, it reached to the 10 billion US dollar in the 4 years. That's channeled by the UN and also other international non-governmental organizations and also individual donations, is almost $10 billion. But this money, I think, didn't achieve the beneficiaries. Not I think, but I'm sure about it. Because, first of all, the delivery cost is between 45% to 75%, is really, now is going to the brokers. The brokers from the United Nations itself. So you see that one example I told you is just 2 days ago, the cost of the internet usage in Yemen is almost $1.2 million for the OCHA. Is one office. This is one office. You see that the tax, if you send $1 via the government, this money is going to the brokers. The brokers, the international brokers, and also the local brokers. And also the rest is going to the fighters. We will see later. So the money is going to the brokers and fighters, is not to the beneficiaries or to the poor people. They have also the United Nations, and it is a platform internationally. They told, okay, we channel the aid via the local non-governmental organizations. Okay, but you see that I did research with law is about the placement of the non-governmental organization in Yemen. We see that just only 13% of the non-governmental organization, they are in the countryside. And 75 of the Yemenis, they are in the countryside. And they are not even active, the 30%. And most of them, they are really in the national and the government level located. This is one thing. The other thing that in 2013, we had like 10,000 non-governmental organizations. Now we have the double, like 18,500 non-governmental organizations. All the factions started to establish non-governmental organization because the United Nations started to, okay, we will deliver the aid via the non-governmental organization because they take over the functions of the state of delivering services. The Houthis established like 2,000 non-governmental organizations. The recognized government had also, even the Qaeda has non-governmental organizations. Yeah, see, it's also Qaeda has non-governmental organizations. So what happened that the rest of the money from the $1, the $1 is 75, it's going to the brokers internationally. So we have 25 cents. The 25 cents is going to the civil society organizations and also to the fighters. The Houthis, the non-governmental organizations, of the Houthis and Hadi government, they use the money in order to feed their fighters and also to try to buy people in local level or to promote their legitimacy in the local levels. So the foreign aid, instead of helping the poor, is now harming and is also now a chance to continue the war itself because there is no effective solution or effective way how to reach the beneficiaries so far. So instead of helping, is harming now in the country. And if you see that the research I just did it is about with like 130 non-governmental organizations. They were from all over Yemen. And we find that all the organization who was really non-governmental organization even has been looting. They looted them. They shut down, storming. They freeze their accounts in the banks. So they are facing many challenges. So I think this is one of the things that you can think about it, that we need how to reform the international system of delivering the aid. One of the projects that I was one of the person who was trying to see it as a pilot project. I contacted one organization in Pune. This organization, they were trying to help Yemen. I told, okay, let us try the private sector. I called someone in Yemen, is a big company. They told it, hi, Said. I told him, okay, we can also have channels, how we can also distribute the aid via your organization. And what happened? They received the money. They add also $2 million to it. And they only gave the tickets to the poor families, because we have also a study to 5,000 family. They went to the stores and they take their ticket and they get to take the food. And the cost was zero cost. But if you see the international now platform that via the United Nations, most of the money is going to them. They rent a ship in the sea to hold the peace talks between the Houthis and Hadi forces, and they paid in the one day like $200,000 for the ship. This is really something. I give you some information, and I think I can later on also get a lot of questions and to elaborate these issues more. And thank you so much for listening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming out, and thank you also for the organizers for making this possible and for inviting me. And thanks, Moosa, for laying the ground here and putting Yemen on the map. I wouldn't even attempt to go into the detail that Moosa went into, because I'm not a descendant of Yemen. I'm an international relations scholar. That means I will have a more global perspective on the war in Yemen going on. And having said that, how many of you had heard of Yemen prior to coming to this lecture? Okay, very good. How many of you had heard about the ongoing civil war? Very good. Last question. How many of you have heard about the ongoing civil war before, let's say, January of this year? A little less, yeah. Obviously, you're not the majority. Because, as Moosa was pointing out, we don't really hear much about Yemen. And for that very reason, Yemen has often been referred to as the forgotten war. Unlike Libya, unlike Somalia, unlike Syria, which is on a daily map, or Iraq, Afghanistan, where civil wars are going on, we don't hear much in the news or elsewhere about the ongoing civil war in Yemen. This is problematic in my eyes, or is also puzzling, as we say in university terms, in academic terms, because Yemen is not a less strategic place. As Moosa was pointing out, it has rich oil resources, right? In that sense, geostrategically, it's an important place. Moreover, it's located on the Arabian Peninsula and provides access to waterways, to the Gulf of Aden, to the Red Sea, but also to the Indian Ocean. So puzzling, why aren't we more worried, more concerned, more hearing about the ongoing civil war? In addition, and as Moosa was pointing out in much more grave terms than I'm doing here, it's a terrible war. The war has been ongoing since 2015 and has a high number of casualties. I think Moosa's statistic illustrated that as well. I was saying to Tide, who was sitting next to me, it's already losing a generation, right, to the war of children. There's people dying from the ongoing civil war. These are numbers from Amnesty International. 17,000 people, moving up to 18,000 people have been killed since then. It's exhibiting the world's worst humanitarian crisis, affecting children especially, but also men and women in the country. And people are suffering from both a famine, and a food shortage, but also from the humanitarian crisis of the conflict, more than 14 million, and amongst them 394 children. And last but not least, something we don't also hear much about, right? The refugees that the war is generating, which are not ending up mostly on the European continent, but rather ending up in neighboring countries. So why aren't we hearing more? It's also surprising to me when I started occupying myself with the topic, why aren't we hearing more? There's international involvement, and that's my focus tonight. If you just look at the list of countries that are backing the Houthis, beginning with Saudi Arabia on to the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Sudan, and not to mention the big players, the US, the UK, and France, but also Iran, I will have a slide later, is equally backed through international players, Russia, as well as others. That would have already made news, right, in other situations with respect to other countries, not in Yemen. Also, the United Nations is not playing a minor role here. Well, granted, it's not involved with peacekeeping forces or peacemaking forces, also as we call them sometimes today, but that might be a reason why we're not hearing so much about Yemen. But nonetheless, it's involved in the country. It's since the Arab Spring in 2011, it has tried to bring the different warring factions and groups together. It has initiated a national dialogue in 2012 and trying to bring about more conclusive and inclusive parliamentary setting, but also a more inclusive constitution. And those talks utterly failed because the plans that were mapped that were not too equally benefiting all groups, and therefore fighting resumed. The UN has also been involved in the country with special envoys who have been trying to mediate between the different factions and have managed in December of 2018 to get an agreement from the warring factions that at least the ports are being demilitarized, right? Pardon? Yeah. Well, it was supposed to be more, but the process is slowly starting, and there is great skepticism as to whether the agreement will actually being held true to and being really implemented. So, what's explaining, so to speak, the silence on that war? And what I will do in the remaining time, I would like to use a bit or put myself into the shoes of a movie director who is offering different cuts of an ongoing scene and different interpretations of what might account for the silence, or why we call it a forgotten war. Beginning with my first cut that would focus on the war from a perspective of power politics. This is basically an example of politics as usual, or an asserting of power on the parts of the different players involved, who are pursuing nothing more and nothing less than their strategic interests in the region. First and foremost, Iran and Saudi Arabia, who have been struggling to gain a regional hegemony and getting ahead of the other, and each accusing the other of being basically too much, having too much power and having too much influence in the region. And that's precisely the rhetoric that Saudi Arabia uses, portraying the Houthis as one of the factions, as simply being puppets of Iran. And this being in danger, or Yemen being in danger, and being only one starting point for the Hezbollahization of the entire region. And therefore, it needs to be involved in the region. So, in some sense, you could see this is simply a proxy war between two regional powers, namely Saudi Arabia and Iran, fighting over regional hegemony. And this brings their relatives along, namely the US and Russia, and other allies that come into play, and that you see displayed here. On the one hand, and backing the Hadi led government, and more so Saudi Arabia, but also Iran being supported by China and Russia. Yeah? But why then aren't we talking about? There is international involvement. Just to remember, this is not a US-led intervention or a Russian-led intervention. Saudi Arabia is leading the coalition in this area, And that might already give a glimpse as to why we're not talking as much. It's not directly related to to Europe or North America, to the north. So that's one interpretation. And I'm just giving here props, basically. I'm putting some provocative arguments ahead in the hopes that you will then ask questions about it more and giving me more floor to elaborate on them. A second way to look at this conflict and look at international involvement and us not hearing more about it is that it's always kind of part and parcel of this ongoing war on terror. And yeah, there is Al-Qaeda fighting on the Arabian Peninsula, and the US has been. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, the US has been involved already prior to the ongoing civil war, and since 2002 in Yemen, fighting Al-Qaeda. And then still in President Saleh allowed the US into its country, allowing CIA agents, special units into the country, and also allowing airstrikes and now drone strikes onto it. This practice was, or this policy was continued by President Obama. And with the argument that Yemen is a breeding ground for terrorists and for Al-Qaeda, and moving to a downward sectarian spiral. Yeah? And Al-Qaeda is said to benefit. When you look a bit more closely, yeah, you could say, well, again, why aren't we hearing it? Obviously, Yemen is not as important as Afghanistan or Iraq. Yeah? It's one amongst many where where the US is fighting the war on terror. There's also some ruptures here that are important perhaps to point out when we look at this, because this is not seamless. Yeah, while the US has been aligning itself with the former President Saleh in the fight against terror, it's been helping a Saleh government to train units in the country. It also has helped the Coast Guards to monitor the waters. But yet, it also had great distrust of the Saleh government at the time, whether it was really doing its job well and was really fighting the terrorists in the assumed sense. This is why I have this cartoon picture of Guantanamo Bay, because the US government has extradited terrorists from Yemen into Guantanamo Bay because it was not sure that the prisons in Yemen were safe enough to keep the terrorists in there. And last but not least, I have a third cut on this, a third kind of way to look at this. What may explain the silence and the forgottenness of Yemen in this. And I think there is a racial dimension to this. Not every humanitarian crisis, not every humanitarian victim is equal another. Yeah? It also is a matter of race and color as to where humanitarian organizations and let alone governments are getting involved. Obviously, in those terms, Yemen is lower on the list than other humanitarian conflict zones and civil wars. And it's coming to be recognized by the US Congress as to what the US has done and how it has been involved, but the recognition has been laid in common. Only of last year is there recognition that the involvement of the US is perhaps problematic, to say the least. by a democratic member of Congress. And this only, you could argue, came to be recognized when the Saudi Arabian government was found to have killed Khashoggi, a journalist. Interesting coincidence. So only then this was seen as problematic. I think also that one could argue that because of Saudi Arabia's involvement in doing the job for the Allied forces, one could also say this is of lesser interest to the international community. It's more remote, and it's tolerating what one could call the post-colonial politics of Saudi Arabia in the country. And I would be interested to hear Moosa on this. But the involvement of Saudi Arabia is very much akin to the former colonial power, namely the Great Britain or then the United Kingdom, which also pitted off north against south Yemen and tried to basically establish itself in the southern half of the country. Saudi Arabia is doing pretty much the same thing and replicating that, pitting north against south, and not only that, but also aligning west and east of the country amongst it. It's establishing so-called security safety belts within the country, and also already calling the south, similar to what the British occupiers did at the time, speaking of southern Arabia, yeah, in having basically won that area over to itself. So in my eyes, this is part and parcel what's going on here, this perhaps racial or post-colonial story that we also need to take into account. With that, I want to leave it with mentioning that those are just three kinds of ways of looking at this conflict, and they're offering us ideas about what's going on here. Not each, in my eyes, is comprehensive, but together they may provide some explanation of why we call this war a forgotten war and why it's getting so little attention from the international community. So I'm curious to hear your questions. Thank you.
So, Jutta, Moosa, thank you both very much for your lecture. I think we get a more increasing better picture of what's going on in Yemen. And Jutta, you mentioned this as being one of the forgotten wars, and you gave several reasons for why this could be the case. But I was wondering, Moosa, do you also see this? Do you also see the civil war in Yemen as a forgotten war?
Well, yes, I see it. It's really clear. It's, as we asked the people here, do you know about the war in Yemen? And yes, only the minority knew about it. So this is just an example for all the people around the world. I think you see that there are a lot of causes, because it's not just only also the Saudis and also the other actors. They have their interests, so they buy people here from the Western side, some media companies, to be silent, even from the TVs channels to the newspaper. This is one thing, and also the other thing that also the international in the international politics, like United States and other, they are trying to make it like this, because they have a deal with Saudi that, okay, we will finish the war within 6 months or 1 year, and like that. So we will cover everything until you finish from the Houthis, and after that we can rebuild the state in Yemen. But what happened that they couldn't, so this is one thing. So they are also, also I just mentioned about the refugees. Here, the people, they start to write why it is forgotten war, forgotten country, is because the media also can make a break. The media is very important, I think, and it is very important.
Yeah. So you would argue there's so much pressure from Saudi Arabia to keep this quiet so they can win this war, which didn't happen, to just keep quiet for now, and then they win the war, and then they can move on.
This was the deal between United States and Saudi and other actors, even from the European Union. Netherlands was trying to do something, especially when the European Council, but they couldn't, because Netherlands is a small country.
Yeah. And
comparing to the other countries.
And is that also now one of the reasons? Well, it's okay. So it's been silent for a long time now. Gradually, we're getting these snippets of information, also because the war is the war just keeps going on.
The war, yes, this is one thing that they couldn't handle how to win the war there, and they couldn't really punish the Houthis, because the Houthis became more bigger and bigger and stronger because the wrong strategies, even the ground. This is one thing. So the other thing that also what happened about the Saudi journalists in Turkey. So this is one thing that also they turn the people in the world to see the name Yemen. We did a research after about it, and we see that in one day they search for the name Yemen more than 30 million person in the world, in just in 1 hour. After what happened for the journalists in Turkey. Yeah. So that means the people start to read about it. So there is some influence from the local communities here, and that we need to speak about Yemen. What is going on there? Yeah. Even it's still a forgotten war, forgotten country so far.
Because you mentioned this, that for the U.S., the Khashoggi murder would have been like one of the triggers for the U.S. to act on this. Yeah. Did it also draw in their allies in a way? So, okay, U.S. is acting because of this trigger, or do France or Belgium have other reasons to act to the extent that they are?
Well, I mean, to some extent, they obviously also have strategic interests of their own in the region, right? So they're not, I would not go so far to call them just disciples of or the helpers of the U.S. alone, but obviously their interests are much more aligned in the region, and I would be interested to hear you about this as well. But I think the further down you go the line, and I had this slide, the more remote you get, right? The lesser involvement you get from these countries. I mean, you could say, yes, Saudi Arabia is based, this is a war of Saudi Arabia and Iran, and then it becomes less direct involvement of the others involved, and perhaps of those international allies, the US is probably the most direct involved, yeah, and not just because of strategic interests in the region, but because I think it also has the it happens to coincide with the war on terror, and hence that justifies involvement in the region. I'm even wondering as to what extent the U.S. would have been bothered to be involved if there wouldn't have been the war on terror.
If it wouldn't have been for these Al Qaeda and ISIS warriors also being in the region.
Yeah.
I think for Iran is also, it has also direct involvement in Yemen.
Yeah, because how's that?
It is obvious because they trained a lot of fighters of the Houthis. They get trained there, they get brainwashed there, and via Lebanon, and there are a lot of experts and also transferring of the military know-how to Yemen. This is one side, and also there is also paradox here. The paradox that also United States was also trying to support Houthis against Al Qaeda.
Okay, so this is interesting. So the Houthis are trained by Lebanon and Iran.
Yeah.
So maybe the first question would be: what's Iran's interest in training these Houthis rebels?
They are trying to establish the new Hezbollah in Yemen against Saudi. It is kind of the nuclear deal. It's also based on the Shiite faith that they need to, because the Zaydi, they are more or less, they are like Sunnah based on their religious side, because this is a need a lecture to explain it more. But they told, okay, Zaydim, they are really bad, they are Shia, but they are really close to the Sunnah and their beliefs and their what they think about Islam. So, but they support them in this way, that they are really Shia. This is one thing. And the other thing, they need to establish, they want to establish new Hezbollah, and even the name of the Houthis is Ansarullah. It's the same as Hezbollah. It's the same way. So, and even when you see the leader of the Houthis, when he has sometimes he has some TV interviews, he start to act like Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon. Even his hand, his way, like that, he's talking, is acting like him. It's the same scenario of Ansarullah and Hezbollah. So Iran is trying to have a proxy wars via this group against, for example, Israel in Lebanon, or against Saudi via Houthis. So it is in the way how to also to be. They have also their faith. They told, okay, the Turkish, they rolled the Islamic word, and the first they should also, the Iranis, they should also roll the Islamic word. So to roll the Islamic world, we need a power. We need a nuclear. Especially Pakistan is a Sunni country, so they have the nuclear. Also, they have the nuclear programs for the military use. So they need to have also the same technology, the same know-how.
Right. Yeah. So there's an interest for Iran to destabilize their. To use maybe the southern country to
use basically Yemen as a platform to exert its interests within the region, right? And that's, I think, what some extent the cynical but also sad part is, that Yemen it becomes and forgive me the word, a playground for a number of regional powers, but also for their international allies to work through Yemen to expand into the region, and expand, and support local groups to then establish their hegemony in the area. I wouldn't say this isn't the case for Saudi Arabia either. I mean, they are also exerting their interests in the region. So perhaps the civil war I would go so far to say the civil war in Yemen would probably not be much of interest if these neighboring powers and then the international allies would have other reasons in mind.
Yeah. So that's just to get back on the point you mentioned, that the U.S. is involved also because Al Qaeda and ISIS there, but they're also they're supporting Saudi Arabia.
Right.
But they're also supporting the Houthi?
They also have been maintaining links to the Houthis. So they're keeping both sides open, because the Houthis they have been in the past and still are fighting Al Qaeda, right?
Yeah.
So there is some alignment of interest. I mean, one can't keep track of the complexities and the paradoxes in this region, and you're obviously much more informed about this. But yes, and that is for me an indicator also that whatever is needed, whatever the interest serves, is basically you can play across bonds, so to speak, if it serves your interest, and that may on one occasion mean going against the Houthis, but in the next moment being an ally, or working with the Houthis if it's in your interest.
Yes, so United States is trying to protect the supplying of the oil.
So that would also be an additional reason.
Yeah. So in addition, it's very important strategic way. That means because if something happened for the oil places really in the borders between Yemen and Saudi, so the supplying this it will create international crisis and also for the different economies in the, for many countries, even here in Holland, in the different countries in the world. So they are trying to, from one side, to deal with Saudi as the biggest exporting country of oil in the world, and also to deal with other groups to how to fight Qaeda and other ISIS and other also these evil groups in Yemen. So it is really paradox, and sometimes you see that two countries are friends in one file they are enemies in other file. This is really this is why I told that the situation in Yemen will stay like this for a long time, and even the decision to stop the war, I would like that is not a Yemeni one, no.
So it almost seems like Yemen is becoming this, like stuck in this tug of war between regional powers. So, but then I'm still, despite getting this overview of all these warring factions, I'm still wondering, what's this war about? Is it about like within the country? Is it about economic interest? Is it about religion? Is it maybe about identity? How do you view this?
I think the war in Yemen, it has all different what you just mentioned about religion, about also how to rule the country. There are different entries in it. I think the war in Yemen is an international war and is supported by Saudis and Iranis. Yes, we spoke about it. But also there is faith. For example, the Houthis, they have their faith. They are really they have mandate from God to rule the country. This is for the religion side. Because they told that they are inherited from the Prophet Muhammad. They are the sons of the Prophet Muhammad, and they are special people in the society. They are the 2% I just mentioned, the social groups.
Yeah.
And they must rule the country, and they ruled the country for so long time, for almost 1,000 years. So they withdrew the power in 1962, and they reorganized themselves from the time to now. As to now that they are taking their right to rule the country back from now after the Arab Spring. So this is one of the things that you can see it. And also, the Houthis, they have the link with Iran, and Iran is active in this case. And Saudi, they have also their own interest to keep Yemen weak, because they are afraid of the problems between the borders.
Yeah.
So there is a big land and it's rich of oil, yeah? Most, like 40% of the Saudi's oil, they are located in the places that they were former for Yemen. So this is also, there are a lot of things
so
inside.
It's an overlap of these
and especially
various.
Saudi, for a long time, Saudi was really inside Yemen in the local communities, trying to buy sheikhs, and they have informal network of power within all the places all over Yemen. And even before the Houthis themselves, they were created by Saudis, yeah, if you know that. In 1995, if you go to Saada, the place of the Houthis, the currency there, it was the Saudi riyal, not the Yemeni riyal. They were supporting the Houthis in order to be against Saleh because of the border problems. And afterward, when they signed the agreement between Yemen and Saudi in 2001, all these things gone, and they told, okay, now we need to establish a new relationship between Yemen and Saudi. We agreed about the borders, and the Saleh was trying to also promote his son to be a president, and so they should accept that this case, it was the informal deal. And they told, okay, we want one condition that you should stop supporting the Houthis. The Houthis in that time, they told, okay, why you stop support us? What they did, they moved to Iran directly, and they start to establish the Shabab al-Mu'min, and I told about it like the 10,000. They start to go via Lebanon to Iran. And I think the Houthis and also United States knew that in that time. So if you see that the Houthis themselves, they were even within Yemen before the 2000 from, they were really like a small state within a state.
Yeah, yeah.
As a group, the tax, even the local tax in the government of Sada, should go to them, must go to them, to the Houthis leadership. So it was a kind like
So they're now fighting back to get these privileges.
yeah.
What struck me in your presentation, I was wondering, so why are there so relatively few Yemeni refugees? And then you said, well, people cannot get out of the country. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, yes, Yemen is really now plugged. You see the sea from the Arab Sea, the Red Sea, and from that side is Oman and Saudi.
Yeah.
So the people, they cannot go there. They kill them in the borders. So, and Oman also is really close, the borders for the Yemenis. So the Yemenis, if they go to the sea, they go to Somalia, to these countries. It's no benefit to go. No. So it's not like Syria, they have open doors via Turkey to come to here. And the people start to speak. So now, if you see that in Holland, like 500 people, and they came like to study or something like that. They are not that much. And the same thing in Germany or in other countries.
So could that also, so to bring it back to the forgotten part, could that also be an explanation why it's been out of sight for several European countries in a way?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the direct effects, right? We're not confronted visibly with the Yemeni war as we are perhaps with Syria or also to some extent with Afghanistan. Yeah, we're not feeling those effects in our faces in our daily lives. Hence, it's much more remote as a conflict, and we are not directly involved. Therefore.
I did the research about the Forgotten War, and it is a paper online published. I choose for newspaper and RC here from Holland, and also the from British I use one, and from France, and also
just to get it out.
Switzerland. And in 2 years, I compare about the framing, also about framing theory, and also I was also looking to how many times they cover the war in Yemen. Sometimes, you know, in the whole year, the NRC covered Yemen like 30 times, and the Syria is like I think it was like 30,000 or something times, and even in the online platform or in the newspaper, the hard copy. So if you see that is really also a paradox here. You see it, that if you people they are trying to cover their eyes, if not the problem in front of their doors.
Yeah. So the cynic would argue it's not even so out of sight, out of mind if you're not confronted with people at your borders.
Yeah, but
I'm trying to ironic, so to ignore the case.
Yeah, but I think there's also something else. I mean, obviously, there is strategic reasons going on as to why we don't hear so much, or the missing refugees. But I think the involved governments also contribute to the invisibility. The U.S. has adopted a rhetoric continuously of calling this a tribal war, right? It's a tribal conflict. It has nothing of an international relevant conflict. It also has argued that this is a region that's chronically in turmoil. So regardless of what we do, this is endemic to this region, and also distancing itself from it. And it's only also, I'm German. In Germany, we really don't hear anything until we didn't hear much until 2018, when the parliament started to investigate and again, in response to the Khashoggi incident, why are we delivering weapons to Saudi Arabia? And why is it all of a sudden, where are these weapons ending up? Oh my gosh, they're ending up in the hands
civilians.
in civilian hands. Yeah. And I mean, it couldn't get any more pathetic than to say, we're feeding Saudi Arabia weapons. Well, we also need to feed the Houthis weapons, right? To make this somehow more just and fair.
Well, it's a business case,
It's
maybe.
a business. It's absolutely a business model, and that gets me to. So what I would suggest. Yes, while there is internal reasons why we don't hear, or also that we are perhaps not as directly affected by the ongoing civil war, there is obviously the involved governments are contributing. And I wanted to get back to a point you mentioned earlier also about the international involvement. I mean, there is something also that we are conscious of the war on terror in other places, but we're not, paying attention to this war, and it's kept under wraps. And I think the only incidences when we really have paid attention was in response to one of the allies being negatively affected. Yeah. And whether this was in the case of the U.S. When its air carrier was struck by Al Qaeda, by suicide bombers in the region. Hence, then all of a sudden it occurred on the map. And so I think our attention to this conflict, unlike other areas, is very much event-driven, and event-driven in a biased way.
So then, who should we turn to maybe a possible pathway to peace? In your lecture, I was under the impression you were quite skeptical of the possibilities of the United Nations.
Yeah, I think the United Nations is. I think it has also its history that is really is a weak efforts in order to achieve the peace there. There's a lot of things taking place there. There's the United States, and especially the Security Council, is not really a professional council. It's part of the geopolitical politics. So the other countries is the same thing: United States, Russia, and China, all of them. So if you see that they will not pay attention to the local people who are dying, because they are just only looking to them as a number. They thought, okay, the people that they has been died or killed directly and indirectly, like 200,000 or 100 or 50,000 out of 27 million is okay, it's a small number. But they don't care. They do care more about their national interest.
So then what actors should we turn to? Are you more optimistic about?
I think it should be from the people themselves. We need to have some public opinions within the Western countries to force their countries in order to really at least promote one faction to be stronger, to have the peace enforcement like what happened in Rwanda. This peace talk now, peace building approach will not be effective at all in Yemen. And this is what I can tell it today, and you will see it after 20 years. But I think peace enforcement is the right way how to achieve the peace in the country.
But the question then, of course, is which parties should the public support?
This is what you need to have, even to also evaluate it, and to see which country, which faction that you must also promote or help. Because now what happened, that United States has interest to support Houthis against Qaeda, and but if they support Houthis is really pro-Iran, and Iran is against Saudi, and this is really something. This is something that a lot of things that. So I think that the international community, if they have really the more attention, they must promote one faction, try to select one, even the form of fighters, because the army before the Arab Spring, now the majority of them, they are ineffective. They are really staying at homes. So how you can try to gather these fighters, train them, and take over the power. This is a kind of peace enforcement. I think the peace building approach will not work in Yemen and not will work in Yemen. Just
So we
what
need-
happening, what happened in Rwanda, and you see the Rwanda case. How is it now? That it was the peace enforcement, and they supported the front in Rwanda to be effective. And we have a research project about it now, how to also to do it later on. I can't give. It's still now in the first stage, but we still have to give some recommendations later on.